she talk when I was doing this earlier?
It's muted.
It's muted?
Yeah.
There it is. Thank you. I must have pushed that when I was doing it back up. Now that it muted again. Oh, that's the mute button. There we go. Yeah. Okay.
We want to know why we're here and what we're supposed to do. Basically, we want to know that our lives matter in the current cultural moment we're living in right now. Maybe this is why for centuries we've been captivated by this phrase, for such a time as this. We're drawn to this idea that God could use the ethnicity, the position, the place of a single woman to save an entire people at a certain moment in history. Yes, God worked in Esther's day, and he's working in ours today. Will you ask him this week to open your eyes to what he wants to do in and through you for his glory and for the good of others? Okay, you guys, here we are. We are ready for session 4 of Esther. And you guys know this week because you already know this phrase. What else is this pretty title but for such a time as this is what has put in some sense Esther on the map. I want to go ahead and jump in. We know, but you guys summarize those
Keep talking. It's fine.
7 verses of chapter 4. But Haman's decree has gone out, and there is mourning all across the provinces of all of Persia. All of those provinces, the Jews are mourning, they are grieving, they are lamenting. Mordecai goes in sackcloth and ashes, and he runs toward the king's gate. Now, it appears that Esther doesn't know exactly what is going on. She's not living the normal life outside of the palace. She's inside the palace. But her attendants come to her and tell her that there is a great problem. And I do think it's important, and I believe it is in chapter 4, yes it is. It says that Esther was overcome with fear. Now, she doesn't know about the decree yet because she actually sends her attendant, the eunuch Hathach, who I actually end up becoming a huge fan of this guy for multiple reasons. We'll talk about it in just a moment. But she sends Hathach to go find out why is Mordecai at the king's gate in sackcloth and ashes. This is very serious, and she's overcome. She's overwhelmed with fear. It reminds me of in the book of Nehemiah, same general time period, when Nehemiah is also in Susa. And he goes before the king, and he's going to ask that he can go back to the land where his forefathers had lived, back to help rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And before he asks the king this request, it says that he says in first person, he goes, oh, I was overwhelmed with fear. So I like this. I like this. This humanizes Esther. This is not, I think sometimes we tend to think of these Old Testament characters as these just flawless, almost like godlike people that never got afraid, that never worried, that were never in the dark. That's the other thing. Esther doesn't know what's going on. And she's overwhelmed with fear. So she goes and she's trying to find out what in the world is going on. This humanizes her to me. So we've got to pick up on these little tidbits. Well, then let's pick up verse 8. This is after Hathach has run over to Mordecai. Mordecai begins to explain what is going on. And I want to read through verse 12. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa, ordering their destruction, so that Hathach might show it to Esther, explain it to her, and command her to approach the king, implore his favor, and plead with him personally for her people. Hathach came and repeated Mordecai's response to Esther. And then Esther speaks back to Hathach and says, Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to tell Mordecai, all the royal officials and the people of the royal provinces know that one law applies to every man or woman who approaches the king in the inner courtyard and who has not been summoned. The death penalty. Unless the king extends the gold scepter, allowing that person to live. I have not been summoned to appear before the king for the last 30 days. Esther's response was reported to Mordecai. So essentially, Mordecai sends this decree that all of the Jews are going to be annihilated, and he sends it through Hathach so Esther can see it, and also says, listen, I'm commanding you, you've got to go and implore the king on behalf of the Jews, on behalf of your people. But here's the thing. This is on behalf of a people who, at least publicly, she has yet to identify. She has yet to identify with these people. Why? Because Mordecai had told her back in chapter 2, keep the identity of your Jewishness concealed. Now, this is tricky because from a Western lens, we might go, well, Esther should have been a little more outspoken here. You know, this is kind of like my Western mindset, like, oh, she should have been like a little bit more bold about her faith. Well, I was talking to one of my Old Testament professors, and he said, well, not so fast, Kelly. He said, you have the lives of an entire people group hanging in the balance. Now, when Mordecai asked her to conceal her identity, not all of that is known at that particular point, but obviously there is a reason that he's saying, hey, not necessarily deny your faith, just don't stand out at this particular time. But Mordecai does say, hey, listen, it's time to identify with the people. It is time to implore the king. And I love, Esther's very practical. Okay, so then she's sending Hathach back, and she's like, hey, listen, I get it. I hear you. There's this thing called a law that if any man or woman approaches the king without being summoned, it's the death penalty. Unless you go and you find out at the bitter end whether or not he's going to extend the gold scepter. But if he doesn't, it's a little late. And so, there you go. Oh, and then she tags this on and she goes, oh, and by the way, I have not been summoned in 30 days. So it wasn't just those women left in the harem that had to wait to be summoned. It was the queen. So to me, at that point, if I'm Esther, it's like, end of discussion. Don't send Hathach back another time, right? This is it. It's the death penalty with this, like, who knows percentage of maybe the king's going to extend the gold scepter. But, hey, unless that's 100%, I don't think this is a good idea. That's what I'm thinking. I'm not saying that's what Esther's thinking. That's what I'm thinking. All right, so then Hathach explains all of that to Mordecai, and Mordecai right back. He goes, okay, hold on. I got another message. And this is verses 13 through 14. Mordecai told the messenger to reply to Esther, don't think that you will escape the fate of all the Jews because you are in the king's palace. If you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come to the Jewish people from another place. But you and your father's family will be destroyed. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. And then Hathach, can you imagine being Hathach, by the way? I mean, he has got to be like, oh, I can't wait to see what he's going to say to this, or what she's going to say back. Or, I mean, it just gets better and better. So he's like, all right, or I don't know if he's writing it down or whatever, but he's, okay, big word for such a time as this. I'm going to be famous one day for this line, just carrying this line. So he goes back, and he hands this to Esther. I think there's so much here. First of all, I want to just begin with him saying, don't think you're going to escape the fate just because you're in the palace. There's this leveling quality here of all human beings. means standing before God Almighty. Whether you're queen, whether you're the lowest of the low, he just says, hey, listen, just because you're in the palace. And we don't know that Esther was thinking this. Mordecai is just saying, if you were going to think this, don't think it. Because you are going to be doomed if you keep silent, if you don't stand up. And so some scholars think that Esther is actually not acting very courageously here, that she's taking kind of the slightly easier path. And I don't necessarily take that perspective, but I can see why scholars would come there, and you get a wide range of whether or not people think that Esther is really stepping up courageously, at least in this moment. And I remember, again, I was hashing this out with my friend Mary Catherine. We were at dinner one night, and I was telling her all about this, and I was like, yeah, this is kind of an interesting explanation there. And she like leans over the table and she goes, Kelly, don't take Esther away from us. Okay, we've got this vision, okay? She's awesome. She's perfect. She's in her queen robe. She's going to take down Evil Haven. Like, she's not, it's like she's the bionic woman. Don't take that vision away from us, right? And here's the thing. I don't want to take anyone's version of Esther away unless it is a version that is not biblical. But here's the thing. Some of our versions of Esther may need to be taken away for a little bit of a time so that she can be given back to us, but not, yes, absolutely, be given back to us in the most biblical perspective. But I think also we will get a version of her that is much more relatable. And it feels real to me that we know she was afraid at one point, that she is saying, hey, listen, I could die. I don't think this is possible. And then she's wrestling with this new information that Mordecai gives. And I love what Mordecai's bringing to the table here, because when he says, listen, if you keep silent, their destruction is sure. But here's the thing. Deliverance will come. It's going to come from someplace. And this is the closest in the book that anyone gets to naming God. He doesn't explicitly name him, but we can see the faith bursting out of Mordecai saying, God will deliver his people somewhere, somehow. It's going to come from someplace. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to your position for this time. And I laugh at that because the who knows question mark and the perhaps, those are not words that I want to hang like my fate on. You might die, you might not, who knows? It could be really, really bad. You could also perhaps be the savior. What I think is that all of a sudden Mordecai's his vision is getting clearer. It's getting clearer, it's getting clearer. And everything that he knows about Israel's history, everything that he must know about God's covenant to his people, everything that he knows about the Torah and God's promises to his covenant people, I think all of a sudden it's coming together, and I think he's having this moment going, oh my goodness, I think living God is still here with us all the way in Susa. I think the light bulbs are going on, and I think Mordecai's going, hey, listen, deliverance is going to come one way or another. Do you want to play a role, Esther? Do you want to play a role? So here's number one. God will accomplish his will one way or another. It's up to us if we want to be part of it. Do you want to participate with the living God in his work? God didn't need Esther. He didn't need Mordecai, but he allowed them an opportunity to participate with him. I love that we don't have to carry accomplishing God's will. Our part is to obey. His part is to accomplish his will. But do you want to be part? Do you want to be part of it? I want to be part of it. Okay, so then Esther, Hathach tells her all this. Esther sends back another message. She's like, I got another message. Hathach goes back. By the way, every time I read this, I think texting would have been so convenient. This could have been accomplished so quickly. But think of the calories Hathach burned. I mean, technology only has so many benefits, right? So he goes running back. Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go and assemble all the Jews who can be found in Susa and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my female servants will also fast in the same way. After that, I will go to the king, even if it is against the law. If I perish, perish. So Mordecai went and did everything Esther had commanded him. Oh, I love this so much. Here's the humanity of Esther and the humanity of Mordecai that I think is beautiful. That the two of them, God's people, man and woman, working this thing out. This is not crystal clear when that decree comes to Esther. It's not crystal clear what's supposed to happen. And this thing volleys back and forth. And Esther's like, but this, and Mordecai goes, yeah, but what about God if he's doing? And then she goes, yes, but there's this law. And he goes, yeah, but, and then she goes, okay, I'm ready. Do you love it when we're in fellowship with one another? This is iron sharpening iron in the most beautiful way. And do you love it that Mordecai in the beginning commands Esther to go to the king, and guess what? Then she sends back a little command herself. She commands Mordecai to go get all of the Jews to fast. So we also don't miss it. Don't miss this male-female, mutual, beautiful submission, deference, honor, kindness, respect that's going back and forth here. It's gorgeous. And we see them changing. We see them pushing one another. And she goes, all right, I got you. Let's go fast. And not just, and this is another piece of Esther, and I love her character here. She doesn't just say, you guys go fast for me. She goes, oh, and I'm going to fast. And I'm going to get my servants to fast. What would that have looked like? Her Gentile attendants. For her to explain all of this to them and bring them into the cultural heritage and the roots of her Jewish history. I would have loved to have been there for that. But these 3 days go by, and I want you to see that even that when she says, if I perish, I perish, you know, we love that phrase. We love that phrase. And I think one of the reasons we love it is because it's so bold. So like, if I die, I die. I'm in with God all the way, and we love it. I think we love it also because, for the most part, none of us are in that exact position. I love I perish, but I mean, I don't want to be in that place, right? And I think sometimes as we are out in the culture, we can identify like, yeah, if I perish, okay, good, because that's so distant. We can't even really relate to that. And I was thinking how Esther was willing to say, if I perish for the people, the Jewish people. But are we willing, for the sake of Christ, to even say, if I'm embarrassed, I'm embarrassed? Are we even just allowing our reputation when we're out and about in Christian culture? You know, I was shopping the other day, and I was at the counter checking out, and, you know, pants, shirts, and the girl behind the counter says, oh, this is really cute. Oh, this is great. Oh, I love this. Tell me how this works. You know, and we're just having all this just benign conversation. And it was the Friday before Easter. It was Good Friday. And she said something about Easter, and her sister was coming in, and I felt like the Lord was like, tell her where you go to church. Invite her on Easter morning. I mean, he's not asking me to be Esther, not asking me to die for anybody. But I'm like, a little awkward. But I just said to her, I said, hey, so it's Easter. Yeah, if you don't have a church, this is where I go to church. Come join us. You know, it's real simple. And she kind of looked at me a little weird. And it was a little weird. And I actually had to come back with a return. A couple days, I was like, yeah, this didn't work so great. And she's like, I remember you. And I'm like, yeah, I remember you. You know? But it's like, hey, we don't know. Who knows? Perhaps. Somebody wants to come to church. Somebody needs to hear about the love of Jesus. Somebody needs to be reminded that they're loved. They need to be reminded of the cross. They need to know what you stand for. It may not be, if I perish, but are you willing to be in a position where if you're embarrassed, you're embarrassed? We want to get out there in our culture. But I also want you to see here, and I think this is so important, that there is a character transformation, I believe, that's going on with Esther here. As she chooses to identify with the people of God, her character, her fortitude, her inner beauty begins to come to light. Notice in those back and forth messages, nobody's talking about her outward beauty or her figure and how beautiful. Now it's all like, oh, are you ready to do what God needs you to do? It's all about in here. And so this is number 2. When Esther decides to identify herself with God's covenant and his people, she begins to transform. When Esther decides to identify herself with God's covenant and his people, she begins to transform. As New Testament believers or believers this side of the cross, are you identified with Jesus Christ? Are you identified with his people? Do people know who you are and who you believe in and who you belong to? And that you are inviting them to come with you, like Esther says, I'm going to have my people fast with me. Like, invite them in. And we begin to transform. All right, I just want to read the first 2 verses of chapter 5. On the 3rd day, Esther, dressed in her royal clothing, and stood in the inner courtyard of the palace, facing it. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the royal courtroom, facing its entrance. As soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the courtyard, she gained favor in his eyes. The king extended the gold scepter in his hand toward Esther, and she approached and touched the tip of the scepter. On the 3rd day. Now, this shows us and tells us that 3rd day is important because remember, the Jewish people and Esther and Mordecai and all of them, they were fasting for 3 days. Esther's already made up her mind what she's going to do. She knows that she is going to risk it. If I perish, I perish. I'm going in. Now she's fasting that God will make a way, that he will do something incredible, that they are relying on him to do what only he can do. It's not said here in the text, but because she had told Mordecai that she had not been summoned in 30 days, you have to believe that one of the prayers that the Jews were praying, or at least if I had been a Jew in that day, the prayer that I would have been praying is, Lord, please help the king summon. Because if he summons her, you don't have to go through this whole song and dance of the scepter and am I going to live, and you're good. I just think that had to be one of the prayers that they were praying. Lord, please, Lord, the ways of the king, we know this, it's in your hands. Proverbs 21:1, the king's heart is in the hands of the Lord and he directs it where he wishes. Maybe they were praying like, Lord, just have the king summon her. But on the 3rd day, no summons. And wouldn't it have been easy for Esther to have been like, all right, Lord, here's what we're going to do. As we're fasting, if the king summons me, I'm in. I'm going to do my part. But if he doesn't, I am just going to take that as a closed door. I'm just going to take that as a no can do. Lord, just shut that door. We use that a lot. Well, the Lord shut a door. Did he? Does he want you to go knock that door down? But she doesn't do that, please. She's like, have your way. But on that 3rd day, there's no summons. So what does Esther do? Oh my goodness, I wish we had imagery of this. She puts on her robe. And she goes before the king. Now, you have to wonder, there's no thus saith the Lord here. There's no the Lord coming in a burning bush saying, all right, Moses, you're going to pick up this staff. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to perform these things. Or, hey, I'm going to part the Red Sea. Or, Joshua, hey, you're going to go in. You're going to march around the building. This is going to come down. There's no promise like this. There's no appearance. There's nothing that we would consider out of the ordinary. She doesn't have a specific plan here, but here's what I believe, and I really do believe this with my whole heart, that Mordecai and Esther knew enough about God's general will, that they knew enough about what God had planned for his people, what his covenant was, his promises to them that went deep into their scriptures. So that this is number 3. Esther knew enough about God's general will to make a specific plan. Esther, and I would say Mordecai, knew enough about God's general will to make a specific plan. And I think for some of us, we want to know, what is God's will for my life? We want the Lord to appear and say, you're going to marry this man. Don't marry that man. You're going to buy this house. You're going to take this job. You're going to be in this career path. And sometimes the Lord's like, actually what I want is I want you to know my word. I want you to know the things that I care about. I want you to know what it means to be a follower of Christ. I want you to walk in those ways. And as you steep yourself in my general will for you, you're going to be free to make some specific. Esther doesn't wait for a door to open, angel to appear, a vision, a word of prophecy. She just puts on her royal robe. She steps out. And she faces the king's palace. Just like a standoff. So powerful. I do think that some of what I'm hearing sometimes in culture is we've gotten a little lax. It's like, hey, have you gotten a job? No, I'm just kind of waiting for the Lord. Kind of just show me, just drop something in my lap. Or have, how's your health? Well, just kind of waiting for the Lord, just miraculously healing, but I don't really want to eat healthy or exercise. And I'm like, guys, it's not that the Lord needs us, it's that he has created us to work, to be in partnership with him. We are on mission. Jesus Christ has called us to be on mission. Now, I am all about being sensitive to the Spirit. I am all about, there are times where God closes doors, and I get that, and it's a reasonable phrase. But I want you to see this. Number 4, God opened a door for Esther, but not before she knocked on it. And she knocked hard on it. She's putting on that robe, and she's standing there, and she's facing that palace, and whew, there's no parting the Red Sea at this moment. She's just going in. I don't know what God's called you to do, but sometimes we just got to go do something because he has called us to a lot. Jesus Christ has called us to a lot. So there's this importance of trusting God's sovereignty while we are doing our part. Esther is the only person in this story, in the book of Esther, with 2 names. Her Hebrew name, Hadassah, and her Persian name, Esther. And here, as some scholars put it, she is forced to decide who she really is. Who is she going to adopt? Is she going to be Persia's queen, or is she going to be God's woman? I love this. One scholar pointed out that Queen Esther, she is called Queen Esther, not just Esther, but Queen Esther 15 times in the entire book. 14 of those times are after she chooses to publicly identify with God's people. After this moment, after she chooses to publicly identify with God and his people, now suddenly, more than ever, she is Queen Esther. And I just cannot say it better than Karen Jones. And she says, Esther assumes the dignity and power of her royal position only after she claims her true identity as a woman of God. Only after she claims her true identity as a woman of God. And I was just thinking on my way here today what it was like for Esther to put on that royal robe. And honestly, probably she didn't put it on. Probably somebody put it on for her. How nice would that be? But I think that she saw those robes differently on that day. And I have to believe that after those days of fasting and after Mordecai said what he said, I have to believe that she was putting on those robes going, who knows? Maybe. Maybe God has given this to me for this time to be used by him for his glory, for his people. And the robes weren't different, but she was different. And I don't know what clothing you're putting on. I don't know if you're wearing the robe of a mom or the robe of CEO or the robe of teacher or the robe of minister or the robe of house cleaner. I don't know what you're wearing, but it doesn't matter what the outer garments are, where God has you to what matters is who's stepping into it. Who are you identifying with? As believers, are you stepping into your God-given place as a daughter of Jesus Christ? That's what matters. Father God, this is a powerful, powerful chapter. And Lord, we know that you're going to accomplish your will because you're God and nothing is going to stop you from that. But Lord, we say together, we want to participate with you because it is our honor. We don't want to miss it. We don't want to miss what you are doing in our day and in our time and in our culture. And so, Lord Jesus Christ, today we identify with you. We identify with your people, flawed as they are, but saved as they are. And I pray, Lord, that we would make you our identity and that we would receive the place and the role that you have given us and that our hearts would be transformed because of who you are. And we will thank you in Jesus' name. I cannot wait to see you back here next week. Keep going. Keep digging into the homework. We'll be back here together next week.
All right, this is where we get to be interactive. So, what was something that Kelly said from the video that kind of stuck with you, or that kind of gave that moment, or aha, or whatever it might have been? I teach fourth graders. I can wait a long time.
I love that she said God's going to do his will, whether part of it choose to be.
Well, we think of times in our life where it's like maybe we got pulled kicking and screaming into his will, but we were there and he used us. So, anybody else?
No.
I think you speak for the group. Just to review a couple of things where she was filling in the blanks in the book, if you've got your book. And this is exactly what you were talking about. She said, God will accomplish his will one way or another. And it's up to us if we're going to be a part of it. And I think this may have been the one part where she was talking about Mordecai and how he was so surprised that God was at work. And maybe I'm reading more to what she said than what she was meaning. I don't think that was an epiphany for Mordecai, because we look at Esther and we see the way that she is acting, and from the very moment she stepped into the palace, you know, how she won favor with everybody through her attitude. She has been taught at the feet of Mordecai growing up. She knows about God, and it's exhibited through her life. And so I have this strong feeling that he was very well aware that God was in Susa. I do think he's maybe seeing those puzzle pieces fall into place, like sometimes when things begin to happen and you look and say, oh, That's why that had to happen for this to happen. And I do think maybe he is seeing that as it comes about. And the part that they are playing in it, and the fact that Esther is there for such a time as this. And then the next thing that we filled in, it says, when Esther decides to identify herself with God's covenant and his people, she begins to transform. When she's finally able to have that liberty to step up and say, yes, I am a Jew and I have this faith. I thought it was real interesting about when she talked about the number of times that Queen Esther is mentioned, and most of them are after she takes this big step. And as she identifies with God, do we identify with God, with Christ? And it made me think, we ate dinner at Los Portales tonight. If you get close to me, you'll know that. And you all know why you'll know that. Because I have the what? I have that smell. Because it just, when you go in there, it just clings to you. And in the Bible, it talks about us having that sweet aroma of Christ. And I think that that's how people will know. They're going to see it. They're going to be able to sense it when they're around you. They're going to know that you identify with Christ. Just like those people could see that in Esther as she won favor with everybody there. And the third point she made was that Esther knew about God's general will. She knew enough about his general will to make a specific plan. It wasn't just, oh, we'll just wait and see what happens. Yes, this edict is out there. I'll just hang out here, Mordecai. You hang out there. Let me know if anything changes. No. She said, okay, we'll fast for 3 days. And then I'll go. And if I perish, I perish. What'd you think about when she said, if we turn that back on ourselves, if I'm embarrassed, I'm embarrassed? Anybody have any thoughts about that?
No.
It really made me stop and think and reflect, because there have been times I was thinking, and I wish I'd gone back and listened to TJ's sermon again, but I know that at the end there he was encouraging us to talk to people around us, talk to people next to you. And I think what stops us sometimes is that embarrassment. We're afraid that they're not going to be receptive. But who knows? And even if that clerk she talked to didn't show up on Easter Sunday, she did what? She planted a seed. And so the next time, if that girl maybe is having some problem in her life, she's like, oh, maybe I do need a church. And that girl that I checked out mentioned this one, I'll go there. So who knows? You never know, even if the person you're talking to. So I think sometimes we kind of have to get over ourselves in that embarrassment stage. Not always the easiest thing to do, to kind of step out there and do what we wanted to do, what he knows. And that part about where we know God's general will. Have you ever wanted to know what God's plan was for you? I talked to you a little bit in one of my previous lessons about when we were in Georgia and Keith had lost his job and we were floundering and really didn't know what to do. Sorry. My daddy called me. And I was crying on the phone. And I said, I just need the heavens to open and God to put his finger in and say, this is where you need to be. I want you in this place at this time. And that didn't happen. We call those months that we were unemployed in Georgia our wilderness years. But then we had our first such a time as this moment where, like I told y'all earlier, my parents called and said, we're moving you home, and we came, and it was just such a blessing. That I wanted to know God's specific plan for my life at that moment. It's the strongest I can think ever in my life that I really needed to know right then. I had 4 babies, and I needed to know what was going to happen to us. And he didn't tell me, but in a way he showed me. And looking back, I can see, just like I think Mordecai could see, all of these things were falling into place. I just kind of had to let them. And that's not easy ever either, just to kind of let those things happen. I'm sorry, I got thinking about my daddy just then and just kind of got overtook there. And then God opened a door for Esther, but not before she knocked on it. And so sometimes I think that we see those barriers and we just want to stop. And sometimes maybe we just need to charge the gates, just go on through. And that's such a hard line. I don't know about y'all, but that's such a hard line to walk. Knowing what's God's will, what's my will, where am I pushing my will into his will. And I think that's where prayer and faith comes in. I think we just have to pray a lot in those situations and hope that if that door's not supposed to be open, it comes back and smacks you in the face and gives a message. And if it is, that when you charge at it, it'll just swing open like it did for Esther in this situation. So I hope that happens. Sorry. I wasn't expecting to get all emotional. It says we can see Esther grow so much in this section of the book. And what are some of the specific areas of her growth and character that you have noted or that you feel are worthy of noting?
Okay. Bernice,
Okay. She definitely has some strength of character to do that. Absolutely.
I think the way that, could you imagine her making that decision without having some conversation back and forth with Mordecai? I can't. I mean, if the story goes that, Mordecai said, here's what you need to do, she says, okay. Even though, that's just so, she shows herself to be so discerning and thoughtful and wise and still having the courage of her convictions once she has, thought it through and talked with this important person in her life that she trusts and respects. Okay, yes, but, she doesn't just, go through like a bull in a china shop. She has thought, she's thought, she's prayed, she's done all the right things. I'm so impressed with that.
And even if those conversations were happening third party,
Yeah.
with a messenger going back and
Yeah.
forth. I love that picture of that. Right back. I saw one quote when I was studying, and it said, we should all consider for what purpose God has put us in the place where we are. And so sometimes you just need to take a look at where you are and think, why has God put me here right now? What is my purpose? And then study to find the answer to the end and take care of it, not let that moment slip. It's funny how sometimes when you're like involved in the studies, like everything kind of relates back to that. And I was driving home the other day, and there was a song playing on K-Love, and it just caught my attention. And I had never heard this song before. Maybe it's been playing on K-Love for a long time. I don't know. But it's the first time I had ever heard it. It's God is in this story. I don't know. I'm going to read you some lyrics. There's torn up pages in this book. Words that tell me I'm no good. Chapters that define me for so long. But the hands of grace and endless love dusted off and picked me up. Told my heart that hope is never gone. God is in this story. God is in the details. Even in the broken parts. He holds my heart. He never fails. When I'm at my weakest, I will trust in Jesus. Always in the highs and lows, the one who goes before me. God is the story. So if the storm you're walking through feels like it's too much and you wonder if he even cares at all, well, hold on tight to what you know. He promised he won't let you go. Your song of healings was written in his scars. God is in this story. God is in the details, even in the broken parts. He holds my heart. He never fails. When I'm at my weakest, I will trust in Jesus. Always in the highs and lows, the one who goes before me. God is in this story. If it reads like addiction, if it reads like disease, he's the one who frees the prisoner. He's the healer of all things. If it reads like depression, if it reads broken home, he's the one who holds your sorrow. He won't leave you here alone. God is in this story. God is in the details, even in the broken parts. He holds my heart. He never fails. When I'm at my weakest, I will trust in Jesus. Always in the highs and lows, the one who goes before me. Always in the highs and lows, the one who goes before me. God is in this story. God is in my story. If you haven't heard it, it's by Big Daddy Weave and Katie Nicole, and you should really go listen to it because it was beautiful. And I just was listening to it all the way home, and I thought, wow, you know, everything. I think God just puts those little moments in our lives. There was one more thing. At the beginning of this, we talked about their season of lament, their mourning, and we talked about Ecclesiastes, about how there's a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to dance. This was Esther's. Goes on in Ecclesiastes, and there's a time to be silent and a time to speak. And this was definitely her time to speak. And in that mourning and lamenting, Kelly asked us this question this week. She says, what did you learn about yourself as you process the following personal reflective question? Are you more likely to, and here are your choices, A, weep in the Lord's presence over a loss, a disappointment, or something that's grieved you, or B, deal with it yourself, push it down, keep it separate from your relationship with God? Okay. B, or like me, it kind of depends on the situation I'm in, and sometimes I'm both, or one or the other, or this time I may be an A, and I totally rely on God. And then the other time, it's like, I need to bottle that up and keep that inside and not share that with anybody. And I want to be more of an A, where I fully trust on Him, and I know that even in those times that I have people with skin on, like we talked about earlier, that I can talk to. That's some of you, and it's my family and my other friends, and you know, just people God put in our lives to help us with these things for such a time as this. Anything else you want to share?
No.
I used most of my time this week. Not all of it, but most of it. So this week, as you go through, just make sure that you're looking for those times where you may be somewhere. Look for your opportunities. Look to see if God's opening those doors or giving you such a time as this. So, I think Theresa's up next week. I did have one message to pass along. I bumped into another one of our widows this week. Mother and I went to visit a place this week and saw Joyce Knott. If you know Joyce, she was a member here. And she was just raving about the Valentine's basket that we sent her, the Valentine's bag. So she said, I would love to be able to thank you. I said, I'll take care of that for you, Miss Joyce. So she was really appreciative of that at a later day. So it's just funny how little bitty things like that sometimes can really make someone's day, or, you know, change their attitude, whatever. So. Any prayer requests, maybe? All right, hold on, let's say a prayer. Dear God, we're just always so thankful for an opportunity to come together as sisters and study your word and learn more about you. We're so thankful for the example of Esther and the way that she was willing to stand up and be a part of your story and help her people and to show us how to be strong women of faith. And dear Father, we just always want to be aware of the opportunities that you give us. Help us to see those and to seize those and to always be instruments for you. Dear Father, I'm sure there are people who need you today, that they're hurting in some way, either sickness or heart hurts or other disappointments. And we just ask that you, Father, just be with us as women as we go out into the world, dear Father, and help us to be your light and to have the aroma of you, and may it be pleasing to everyone around us so that they will know that we are yours. We are so thankful for the gift of your Son so that we can be his light, his reflection in this world. And dear Father, just be with us always. Just in pray.
Casey graduates college, and Nikki graduates high school. So we're
No, we were worried about that, but it's not. It's, college graduates so much earlier than what high school does. Thank goodness, hers is first weekend in May, and then Mickey's season. And this year, it's on a Friday night. It's not even on a Sunday.
So enjoy your visit. You'll have fun
We
together.
changed it to Friday night on the football field. Yep, we're graduating.
Hi, Fran.
Hey, I never liked graduation on a Sunday. I'm excited. I'm like, I want graduation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are excited about it. Yeah.
Just like, and then like you can have graduation, and then the next day you can do the graduation party on Saturday. Where it's, on the Sunday, you usually did maybe on Saturday or Sunday. It's
Yeah, it's all one day. You got church, graduation, and graduation party, and it's just everything.
And of course, if you have family coming in, so I'm like, whoever said it was on Friday night. Thank you. I like it. You
did have a lot going on.
And also doesn't coincide like, a lot of people don't have graduation. Right. So if you want to go, like
Somebody else's.
yeah, it doesn't. Wow. I'm all for it. I'm just,
What's your youngest thing about everybody being
I don't know,
Yeah, we What that make you planning to do?
we go to college.
Somewhere.
I mean, he's narrowed it down. He's went from saying Tennessee Tech to Mississippi State to Harding to Freed, back to Harding to Freed. Last time it was Harding, and then it was Freed. But he wants to do engineering.
Yeah.
He starts at Freed and then leaves. He's going to have a
Right.
So I don't
Yeah.
if they had a 4-year engineering program where you, I think because he loves.
Yeah, I was like, hold on to that. I'll send that.
Which is crazy. But I'm like, now I lost it. Yeah,
You were, he probably already got him friends. Here he goes. Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
and then so
Yeah.
do not listen.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. Looking on Tam, but, huh?
What mom think about her?
Think about it. We got to, we just went to the
About it
She was running late.
And you like that.
We went to Jackson Meadows. I don't remember the name of that one for some reason. We went to Jackson Meadows and just toured and stuff, and we got there. She's like, I'm not ready. Yeah. Because they might not ever. But I've told you, she loves Kirby Hines in Memphis where Janice Wall is. And so she's been there, and she's never said it, but I'm sure she's comparing and thinking, this doesn't match. No. Well, she thinks it's too expensive for her, but she has no clue. And so this was just kind of our foot in the door, just to kind of get a baseline, this is what this will cost, compare. Pam, my older sister, said she might come like over Easter, maybe just take her to Memphis. It's been, because it's kind of hard to go on the weekends. So,
I'm like,
that's Jeannie. She's the youngest one. She's doing really well. Yeah. They removed what they needed to remove. There was no lymph nodes involved. So she just, a little radiation and all those pills for like whatever. But yeah. It was, worked out well. Yeah, we did last year. And I keep moving mine back, because it's like, I get close to that point to go to the doctor. Isn't that awful? I'm still not going to let this
Miss Ruth is the sweetest, trustworthy. I'll send you Ruth for your number.
Tell me your experience with your lesson.
all the time. Or it's like, I thought, okay, I want to add this to the conversation. Then when it comes back around, it's like, I had a really good point, but I have no clue what it was. It just flew off.
she's done at the lift. I see her walking in Liberty Golf. That's when I come home.
She's like, get alive, put extra breath on that.
She does hard.
I've heard she still looks much better than like.
She really looks way better. Way better.
Yeah.
That's about one. Well, y'all have a good rest of your night.
Tell us how tan you look.
Oh my
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, the 50 is what I put on. It's good.
I'm
I
just
mean, you
ready
got
for sun and some color and, I'm just ready for it.
Yeah, heat. I mean,
Yeah. I know.
our house was so, it's usually colored.
And it's echoed over.
Yeah.
Let's see, y'all.
Bye. So was Jeff's aunt, was that expected, unexpected?
Yeah, I mean, she's having good trouble. She's having some, that's, I was too. My mom is dead, so.
Okay. Yeah. Does she have children?
I'm doing surgery. There's pain, surgery. But I got some different things. And what Richard dealt with on. And, I was way very. I can just about skip along.
Yeah.
But I'm just,
Yeah. Especially around people that I know. It's like,
I really was out, but I, present. Yeah. Well, they said they'll have her up and walking in a couple hours and she will come up. So surgery's early. Okay.
yeah, well.
I'm glad I stayed
Yeah, yeah.
That's all I'm about. Didn't plan that. But, yeah, I told her, I said, let's come back. Really don't know. Yeah. Right. I would love her. And I'm like, I understand all that, but we want to make, we don't want you to fall after the surgery and then have a bigger so. Yeah, send me. That would be great. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure how much we have to pay. This is her wife of mine. I mean, yeah, send me that. Yeah, I will. I will. Thank you for teaching. Yes. I didn't say that, but I knew he was looking really hard for something else. Yeah. That's what I said. I'm not. Just out on that, I'm a good prayer.
I told her to be. Hey, what you doing? Retirement day Don't even help each Dad's gonna tear it down. We kind of want to
What you got on your house?
We are getting ready to fix your floor. He was telling about that the other night.